Welcome to Liberty Legion, where sensibility rises above radicalism and liberty stands above all. Join us as we bring common sense back into the conversation for freedom and for the future. Now here's your host, Aaron.
Taxpayers fund everything, and it feels like we have almost no say. And most major decisions, and we'll get into a few of these examples, require no voter approval, even if, again, this is our money given to the government, and they just waste it, it seems, with very little consideration for the losses that can come as a result of these decisions. So today we'll be diving into taxpayer waste, what we can possibly do to, at the very least, increase transparency in these decisions that seem to just, light a match on our own dollars. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of Liberty Legion. We will dive into this exciting topic. In the meantime, if you could please subscribe from whatever platform you're listening from, I greatly appreciate it. Comments, sharing with friends helps me out immensely, and I'm just really glad you're here. All right, let's dive in. So it seems like over the decades, authority has shifted from citizens to boards to agencies to bureaucrats, and there's rulemaking happening, there's statutes in place, and a lot of voters simply aren't aware, right? We have things going on. We have our own lives. We're busy. We can't keep up with all of these different rules and statutes that essentially provide cover for what feels like secret meetings in the form of executive sessions, poor deals being made without our approval, and we just find out after the dollars have been wasted. Bribes are commonplace, right? We have the example in Fall River, Massachusetts, where a mayor was convicted of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars from companies seeking marijuana licenses. And that is one example. I could do a 3-hour episode on the examples of corruption and waste that we have in our city, state, even federal level. We have school boards selling land and assets without voter approval at a loss, a massive loss that we're going to get into here shortly. We have cities negotiating in executive sessions, and executive sessions allow these city councils, mayors, etc., government officials to have these meetings in secret. And we've handed over the power to the process, not the people. And it feels like we're getting further and further and further away from this decision making. I understand we have a representative democracy, right? We elect these people to represent us, and we hope that they'll do a good job. However, more and more frequently, they don't. And so there needs to be an ability for the people to have some level of transparency so we can tell how they're doing their job. And if we need to, force them out of office, which I would like to see happen much more frequently than it does, by the way. So the first example I want to get into today is a school district in my home state of Colorado. It's Jefferson County Schools, and they are not really a stranger to controversy. You can just Google them. Libs of TikTok, I would say, showcases them multiple times a month at this point. It's really ridiculous that the same superintendent is still in power. But again, that's probably an episode for a different day. What I want to talk about is the sale of Emory Elementary School and the property associated with it. Now, this property is being sold to the city of Lakewood for $4 million. It has a school, it's about 17 acres, and the sale is closing for $4 million. If you know this area, and for that amount of land and for a structure that big, that feels low. Now, assessors and other estimates value this property around $9 to $12 million. Why is a school district who's facing down a $65 million deficit selling a property for a loss of multiple $1 million? The appraisal has been hidden from taxpayers, and the state statute, which is 24-72-204 in Colorado, part of the Colorado Open Records Act, it's been around for decades. It protects real estate appraisals until the property's title officially passes to the new owner. It's discretionary. So Jefferson County School District can decide to share that appraisal, or it can decide to keep it, which in this case, it has not shared the appraisal, and it will not be shared until this deal is closed. Now, the reason for this is it's typically said, and Jefferson County said, it could compromise their negotiating position. I'm sorry, but clearly you are not strong negotiators if you are selling this property at a multi-million-dollar loss. This makes no sense. Something seems very fishy here. I can't tell you what it is. I will at some point try to dig into the connections, and hopefully more information will come out surrounding this deal after it closes. Now it gets more interesting. The city of Lakewood is then turning around and selling off a portion of the property, the most desirable portion, and the structure for only $1 million to a nonprofit. So the city of Lakewood is also likely taking a loss where they could have maybe earned some money for their taxpayers or for their city by selling at a competitive price. And again, zero voter approval. Despite this being a building that was built by the taxpayers, maintained by the taxpayers, no say, you can essentially purchase this property, maintain it, but we're going to sell it out for pennies on the dollar. Now, there's not a ton that residents can do here, unfortunately. So one option would be, maybe trying to pursue civil action for a failure of fiduciary duty. But the primary mechanism for something like this is political. It's pressure from the voters to vote these school board members out or ensure they don't get reelected. And I think one thing that Jefferson County residents should pursue, or even the residents of Colorado, is maybe proposing changes to require an independent third party to review these sales in cases of significant price discrepancies or if it's a particularly large asset. And then that third party can say, listen, this is not a competitive sale. Something's fishy here. We believe you need to release the appraisal and the details of this to the public before closing the deal and allow them to have a say on it or hold a public session. I think that would improve accountability for this tenfold. And it's interesting because the school district is participating in a allowable process where they give first right of refusal to these municipalities. And Jefferson County has several properties that are going to come up for sale because they're having to close schools due to declining enrollment and financial crisis. So it's not really an issue of you're closing the school, that's fine, or even you're selling the school. But why would you not try to sell the school at a competitive bid to earn money to help soften that deficit? This makes no sense. So now we'll go into the Chicago 99-year parking meter disaster. And you may or may not be familiar with this. This happened back in 2008. So this was quite a while ago, but to me, it's a similar example to what happened in Jefferson County schools. So I wanted to highlight it and kind of give you just the rundown of it. I find it interesting. So we know 2008 was a rough year, right? We had the market collapse, housing market was in disarray, and Chicago was facing down a massive deficit. And rather than increase property taxes, Mayor Richard Daley in December of 2008 leased the entire city's parking meter system for 75 years, so until 2083, to Chicago Parking Meters LLC, which is a consortium led by Morgan Stanley. Now, the total they got for this project was $1.15 billion. This also included the lease of 4 downtown parking garages for 99 years for an additional $563 million in 2006. And again, Daley pushed this deal to avoid raising property taxes. Okay, everyone was facing financial hardship at this time. I understand. Many people were not able to afford to keep their homes, unfortunately. So if you try to increase property taxes, that would only fuel the crisis and create further hardship for Chicago residents. Okay, but there's a lot of details of this deal that are very fishy, suspicious, and just outright like, what were you thinking? Most of these funds that they received from this sale were depleted within just a few years, so it didn't go far. And it was passed on a rushed vote through the city council, and the mayor's son and father apparently had connections with Morgan Stanley, who clearly greatly benefited from this deal. In June 2009, a Chicago Inspector General's report revealed the meters were worth at least $2.13 billion. As a reminder, it sold for $1.15 billion to the city. Nearly double what the city received is what it was valued at, less than a year later. Internal Morgan Stanley documents valued it even higher at closer to $10 billion. So the city forfeited a stable, growing annual revenue stream at a heavy discount, it would appear. There were some other stipulations in this contract that were head scratchers too. And the city, if you're going to offer an asset like this at such a discount, you would hope that you got favorable terms within the contract. Not at all. So I'll read through some of these. But within the contract, it says there's compensation for lost revenue, meaning the city must compensate CPM, which is the company, Chicago Parking Meters LLC, for any lost revenue when meters are taken out of service for street repairs, festivals, or even the addition of bus and bike lanes. These true-up payments have cost the city millions annually. So not only did you sell it for a loss, but now your taxpayers are paying this company when they're not seeing the benefit of the revenue from these meters. Even further, there's a nuclear option within the contract. It has a clause that would allow CPM to terminate the agreement and demand all projected future profits if the city took actions that reduce the system's value by more than 25%, which effectively handcuffs the city from making major changes. As a reminder, this contract goes through 2083. Now, another just highlight of this gem of a deal is that the impact on citizens. Parking rates were dramatically increased after the deal. with downtown hourly rates reaching some of the highest in the country, impacting residents and small businesses. Because you handed this over to a company who's for profit, and I'm all for capitalism, don't get me wrong, but who wrote this deal? And who didn't include maybe a cap on how much these parking rates can increase? And who wrote the deal to go till 2083? Insane. And for that cheap of a price. I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. And what's even more disappointing is no city council member or the mayor were forced out of office as a result of this deal. And taxpayers didn't know about it until, the deal was closed. City council voted on it. I don't know. I think if this was actual dollars we were seeing coming out of our account, or if we had a home that we were in possession of and the government was like, oh, sorry, you have to sell it for half the value, then maybe we would get emotional enough and emotionally invested enough to take action when these things happen. But it just seems like we have the memory of a goldfish as the American people. And so these things will just continue to happen if we don't change course. Now, this is a more recent example that a lot of people have spoken about, and it has had a decent amount of attention, and that's the LA homelessness issue. So they have spent billions of dollars, and yet it appears homelessness is rising. Now, the combined city and county allocations are approaching $2 billion for this crisis and supposed solutions. $1.28 billion was budgeted for 2023 and 2024 alone. Now, a November 2024 report by City Controller Kenneth Mejia, forgive me for mispronouncing that, found at least $513 million went to sluggish, inefficient approaches. So they're spending $500 million on approaches that aren't even effective at addressing the issue. Los Angeles, that's a lot of money. And despite these efforts for spending, LA County Homeless Count found a 10% decrease in unsheltered homelessness in the city. So it's not even working. And they're continuing to do this annually. The budget is north of $1 billion again from the mayor for next year. What are we actually doing, and why are residents allowing this? It's craziness. So I will say, if you live, and these are examples from Jefferson County, Colorado is a blue state, heavily blue state. Chicago, very blue. Los Angeles, very blue. Maybe it would be time to try something different. Just an idea, just throwing it out there. Take that how you will, but it seems like blue no matter who could be to your detriment. Just a lot of money with zero results, or a lot of wasted money without addressing deficits and issues within the cities. So I do want to just go through like a quick bullet list of other taxpayer waste, because I'm sure you're not sick enough yet. So we have the California high-speed rail, which has cost $128 billion. Little to no progress. We have the Pentagon, who has $6 billion of untracked funds. We have the GAO, which said we have around $240 billion of improper payments annually. It's great. COVID fraud, around $280 billion lost during that fun fest. I don't think the government has a money problem. I think it has a responsibility problem. So when people are shouting to me, let's increase taxes and give the government more money, I'm like, why? So they can, again, just flush our money down the drain like they seem to do very, very well. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of why this keeps happening. We have executive sessions, which I talked about early on in the episode, that hide these deals, and they can easily be abused and keep information from taxpayers. Meetings that maybe should be public if very large decisions and very large financial decisions are being made. We have no competitive bidding. From what I can see in this Jefferson County Emory Elementary, City of Lakewood said, yeah, we'll buy it for $4 million. And Jefferson County's like, cool, great. Didn't offer it up. And when you're in a budget deficit, the responsible thing to do would be to go through a competitive bidding process. And maybe that's a reform that can be sought as well, as is requiring that. It seems like agencies tend to bypass voters entirely, and then nothing can be done until it's too late, which we're going to see with this Jefferson County. We won't see the appraisal released until the deal is closed and it's too late to do anything about it. There can be very weak disclosure laws or loopholes that allow these deals to be negotiated, like I said, behind closed doors. And the incentives feel like they reward insiders, not taxpayers, or they don't reward the representatives for doing their job properly. And this is where it comes in on voters, right? We know specifically with the school district, we have very low turnout for local elections, and people just aren't tuned in, which again, you're paying these cities in the form of property taxes, at least Jefferson County, for these schools, and they're just wasting your money. If that doesn't get you angry, I don't really know what else will. Now, let's get to the fun part, which is the solutions. You guys know I will never do an episode where I'll highlight a problem to this extent and not give you guys possible solutions. Hopefully, I'm not screaming into the void, and maybe someone will take these and run with them. I'll do what I can when I can, but this is important to add to the topic of discussion. One possible solution is to require voter approval for major public asset sales over a certain threshold, or when, like I said, the municipality, the school district, the city, the state is in a deficit. Have mandatory public appraisals Or at the least, I can kind of understand why it's necessary to keep them confidential from a negotiation standpoint. But then at least have a third party evaluate the deal and then determine if it needs to be released to the public, or if further evaluation needs to be done, or if it's a bad deal, or if it seems to be favorable terms to the district and therefore the taxpayer. I mentioned this just a little bit ago, but competitive bidding requirements. So again, you can't just offer the property to sale to one party and then not negotiate whatsoever. Especially if you're at a deficit, you kind of lose that luxury of doing whatever the heck you want. Because clearly, if that deficit's not solved by these sales or cuts, it's going to come back to the taxpayer having to pay in more dollars, which they already paid for the property and the maintenance. Anyways, that's a whole... Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox again. And for the third time, let's limit these executive sessions. And just to explain a little bit further, an executive session is a closed-door meeting of a government body, such as a city council or agency, that allows for the confidential discussion of sensitive topics that cannot be discussed publicly. These topics often include personnel matters, legal issues, real estate transactions, and other sensitive information that, if made public, could harm the public body or individuals involved. To convene one, the body must first vote to enter executive session during an open meeting and state the specific purpose for the closed session. So maybe some reform around that and when they are and are not allowed to hold these executive sessions. Independent audits with public release. If a sale is done at a massive discount, then force a independent audit and then have a report released. So therefore, next time these voting or these elections come around, you can vote more properly. Plain language and transparency laws. An example could be state sunshine laws. These regulations mandate government agencies to operate transparently by making their meetings, records, and activities open to the public. They aim to promote accountability and prevent corruption by allowing the public to observe and participate in government proceedings. And then there's also citizen-led ballot initiatives. So if you find some murky process or you have a really crap deal like what happened in Chicago, what's happening in Jefferson County, Colorado, find out what the problem was or what statute or rulemaking allowed this to happen, and then go at it head on with citizen-led ballot measures in your own state. So to close this out, taxpayers should never be spectators. And it feels like more and more we are. And we're just numb to the amount of waste that's happening. But imagine if we could collect all this waste and give it back to every single American. Imagine what that would do for people who are in some pretty dire straits in this economy. And we have to fix the country from the outside in. So we have to start locally. Okay, people, please, please, please. If you take anything away from my podcast or what I talk about, please get involved locally. For the love, we need more help. And when we aren't paying attention, the corruption and waste just grows exponentially. And that's why we are where we are, right? This didn't happen overnight. It takes active citizen engagement to hold the government and our own tax dollars accountable. You should care about where those dollars are going. And you should extra care if they're being wasted. And it feels like these decisions are just being made because that's not coming from that school board member's pocket directly. Sure, they helped pay for it as a taxpayer, but as a collective, they don't care. And the government works when the citizens hold the pen, and we need to start holding them accountable. So I hope this gave you some ideas for a very frustrating problem that we see across the country. I only gave you a few examples, but we know that this is much more rampant. And even at the federal level, we see it right in front of our faces, and it seems like nothing ever changes. So I hope someone will take some of these solutions and run with it. If you are doing something in your community or you want to see a change, please comment on this episode and let me know what you might be doing. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Liberty Legion. I truly appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe before we go, and we will catch you on the next episode.